Howdy, everybody. Shasta College. How was the long weekend, your Labor Day weekend? Hopefully, you did something. Got cool somehow. You're lucky if you have a pool or go to the lake, have a boat, something. Or just do what I do sit underneath my air conditioner all day or hang at a Starbucks. Anyway, hope everything's going okay out there. I'll start grading your papers today. Your last essay, your second essay. I'm going to sign another essay right now. I'll post it today. I want you guys to watch the film Citizen Kane, 1941, directed by Orson Welles. Write your 3-page paper. I'll put all the details up today or tomorrow. You'll have a week to do it. That's all I'm going to talk about today is Citizen Kane. It was we're coming out of the Depression. We have a bumper crop year I talked about last week, 1939. Hollywood is raring to go, and they're bringing in lots of money, and they're spending a lot of money on films, epic films like Gone with the Wind, Wizard of Oz, Stagecoach, Wuthering Heights, and so many more others. Europeans are kind of shut down right now because Hitler has invaded Poland, and they're looking at France, and they're bombing London, and they're itching to take over those places. And London is asking for help from us, but our Congress says no. Franklin Roosevelt wants to give the help, but American people were tired of the war, the Great War, World War One. It's before we started numbering all the wars, and they didn't want to get us involved with a bunch of our guys get killed again. So they thought it's over there, it's in Europe, it's not going to get here. Boy, were we wrong on that, you know. But we're in this little sweet spot from 1939 to 1942. That's when the Japanese and bombed Pearl Harbor. So for about 2 to 3 years, war was in a distance. The threat was there, but wasn't here. One thing about America, we're surrounded by oceans and South America and Mexico, so we weren't worried about an invasion. We're feeling pretty cocky and safe. Uh, then Pearl Harbor hit, and we didn't feel safe at all anymore. And I'll talk about that on the next lecture in a couple of days. But today, I just want to talk about Citizen Kane. It's a film that was made by a 25-year-old a writer, director, actor who had never done a movie before. He was a classically trained actor and a director, and he made his fame directing in New York City plays, and also he in 1937, I do believe it was. It could have been 38. He did a radio broadcast. Radio was huge. It was before TV, folks. And if you couldn't, everybody was glued to the radios, and they had radio dramas, not just the news or music like we have now. They had dramas and comedies, and people listened to the radio like we all watch Netflix now. And so he did a radio show that was produced by his theater company called the Mercury Theater, and it was called The War of the Worlds. And it was Halloween, and they did a fake news broadcast of the Martians landing. I think it was in New Jersey. It's based on the H.G. Wells novel, and threatening us with violence, threatening Washington, D.C. And they did it such a realistic way. You can listen to the whole broadcast. I might, when I show you a little documentary on Orson, they'll have a snippet of it. They did it so realistically. They had a disclaimer at the front of the show saying, this is a radio drama. This is not happening. This is Halloween, folks. This is our gift for you. But they didn't say it again. And so if you tuned in 10 minutes into the show, it sounds like a real radio broadcast, news broadcast of a real invasion from Mars. And yes, I know it sounds silly, but in those days we didn't know if there was actually Martians or not. It was a lot of people believe there was, or space aliens from another country, I should say, space aliens from another world. Some people still believe that. So in 1938 or so, it wasn't that far fetched. And so millions of people tuned into the radio show and they believed it. They believed it to the point where a lot of them started driving out of town. They started running for the mountains, actually, to hide in the hills. Literally, run for the hills, folks. Some people, as reported, committed suicide over it. Uh, it was that realistic. Well, it all turned into be a big hoax, probably one of those famous hoax in hoax history. And Hollywood saw what he did, what audience he had, and Hollywood knows how to make money and they know where to invest their money. And so they asked him to write a movie. And he wrote a movie, and they said, no, it's too much. It's a period piece. It's too, it was, he wanted to do Don Quixote. And they said, no, not on your first one. It's just too much to take on. Do you have something else? Well, him and his co-writer, Mankiewicz, came up with another script based on a newspaper mogul. In those days, owning a newspaper was like owning Netflix now. That was how people got their information. And Randolph Hearst, who was his father, had made a ton of money in the gold rush in the Old West time. And the son started these newspapers. The San Francisco Chronicle would be one. They're still going, by the way. And at one time, he owned 50, 60 papers throughout the whole country. He was a media mogul. And he controlled the media, sort of like if you listen to Fox News, Rupert Murdoch controls he's controlling the message that gets out. CNN controls their message they're getting out. It never used to be that way. It used to be like they're only trying to get out the truth, but that's all changed with 24-hour news. That's another class I teach in contemporary television. A 24-hour news has changed the whole landscape on who to believe, who's lying, why are they lying, why are they not telling the truth. We never had these things. We believed the news was the news. Anyway, so Randolph Hearst was hugely powerful, multi-millionaire and influential man. And Orson Welles and his writer, they came up with a story based on somewhat on his life. About a rich kid born into wealth, and he starts a newspaper, and how he manipulates people around him, how he runs for public office. Hearst did all this. He had a movie. He was married, but he also had a movie star mistress, Marion Davies, and he kept her in a beach house down in Santa Monica. And if you've ever been down the freeway on 101 to San Simeon, it's going on the way to Santa Barbara. You can see Hearst Castle. It's on the way. It's still there. He built that for her. And if you've ever been down, you can take a tour of it. They have tour buses going up to the house. And his wife knew all about this. It was public knowledge that they were having this. She was his mistress. She was a decent actress. She was in silent films, but she did speakies too. In the Orson Welles film, she's not an actress. The woman is a singer, and kind of a poor singer, and they do make fun of her. Marion Davies was an adequate actress, and so that part is not accurate. But you do dramatic license, as they call it, to make it more exciting, interesting. And so Orson made her a really bad opera singer, of all things, and he tried to buy her career. Orson Welles did the same thing with his actress mistress. That's what you do with mistresses, folks. You buy their careers. Anyway, especially in Hollywood. And so when this movie was made, and it came out it was made in 41. When it came out, Hearst got wind of it, and he heard it was about him, and he wanted to put the kibosh on it, so he wouldn't allow it to be advertised in his papers. He just said, kill this movie. And for pretty much, he got what he wanted. It wasn't a huge hit at all. It was They did win the Academy Award for Best Screenplay that Orson shared with Mankiewicz. And then the movie kind of disappeared. Until in the 50s, the French, who are cinephiles of the highest order, they have I'll talk about this when we get into the French New Wave cinema. They have a book there. It's a monthly cinema book called Cahiers de Cinema, which essentially notes on cinema. And they took cinema really serious, not just gossipy things like we do here in the United States in our magazines, but as an art form. And they wrote great articles about our artists like Alfred Hitchcock, John Ford, Howard Hawks, and Orson Welles. The French loved American movies. They are the state of the art. That's what they wanted to do themselves, but they don't have the money. Germany's knocking on their door to invade their country, so they're not going to make any movies there, folks. And so, but in the 50s, after the war, they wrote about these auteur directors. I'm going to talk about that later. Auteur is a French word for author of your own work, meaning they have a visual stamp. There's an ethical stamp. Their scripts and their movies all walk and talk like an Orson Welles movie or Alfred Hitchcock movies. We don't have that so much anymore. Movies have become rather generic. It's hard to tell who directs them anymore, by committee mostly. There's still some auteur directors out there. One of the big one would be Quentin Tarantino, Steve Spielberg, the guy who did, I always forget his name. Why do I forget his name all the time? He did, oh, come on. You guys love him. He did the Batman, 2 Batmans, and he did a really good World War II movie, Dunkirk. He's an auteur director. He puts his own, you can see it's his movie, Christopher Nolan. And he films in film still, not a digital camera. He films on celluloid. I'll talk about that later, what the difference is, celluloid compared to digital. Those guys like him and Tarantino still film using film stock, not digital cameras on hard drives. They feel it looks too easy. It looks too perfect. It doesn't look like how life looks. And I agree with them. But the digital world has really gotten improved a lot. Anyway, the point is the French rediscovered our directors, and then all of a sudden film schools started in this country in the 50s. We never had those before. And these films were shown in these film schools in NYU, Columbia, UCLA, San Francisco State, throughout the country, Chicago. And so these directors that were kind of forgotten a bit were rediscovered. Citizen Kane was written about as a work of genius. The photography, the script, the acting, the themes, all of it. People looked at it with new eyes. The critics really praised it as being a revolutionary artwork that was not noticed in the beginning because the movie was released 1 week before Pearl Harbor. Bad timing, folks. And it was released and died at the box office because guess what? We're now in a world war with Japan and Germany. And so then filmmaking changed again. I'll talk about that in the next lecture about the World War II era of our filmmaking of propaganda films. That's war films, folks. A lot of them started John Wayne. But before that, we had Citizen Kane. What makes it great? I'm going to give you some hints. This is what you can write about when you're looking at the film, and you can research it, please do. But Greg Toland was the cinematographer. That's the guy behind the camera and the lighting guy, and he was a genius. He was inventing lenses. Orson had a lot of weird requests. He'd never done a movie before, and so he always says in his interviews, I didn't know what the hell I was doing, so I'd ask for stuff that normally if you knew what you're doing, you wouldn't ask for because it didn't exist. But Greg Toland would say, let's try to make that happen. And so he had this thing about, it's called deep focus, where the background is in focus, the foreground's in focus. He didn't create that. John Ford kind of created that, but Orson took it up a notch. Citizen Kane is all filmed on a big studio set. It's very operatic in its lighting design, very theatrical, because, well, Orson came from the theater. So they use that theatricality, the lighting, lots of dark shadows and bright lights. And um, so Orson used his theater training and then the cinematography genius of Greg Toland, who directed some of the greatest movies, and then for John Ford and others. And he died young in the 40s, I think. Um, he Grapes of Wrath. I mean, these are brilliant films that Greg Toland. He was actually inventing lenses they didn't have. Um, and so Orson was given carte blanche at the studio. They asked him, "What is it he wants?" He wants a bunch of money. He said, "No, I want final cut." That means he gets to make the final choice on how the movie's edited. That's rare on a first-time director. Usually, the studios will take over, and they want to put a happy ending on it or an ending that they think is more commercial. They will. He said, "I won't do it unless I get final cut." And they wanted to do business with them so bad, they said, "Okay." And they regretted that forever because it's not an easy story. It's not a happy ending story. It's more like real life. Um, but it's about this rich kid who it extends to being a movie, not a movie, but a publisher of newspapers, and runs for office. He loses. He has his affair with a woman, and that brings down his career. He loses all his money. Essentially, Citizen Kane loses everywhere he goes. It looks like he's a winner, but he really isn't. And he is trying to do the right thing, but he doesn't. He's a flawed character, flawed hero, if you will. But he was simply seeking love. In the movie, starts off with him as a child, and he's playing in the snow, and he's going up a downhill in his sled. Then he's taken away from his parents and put in a fancy boarding school. He lives with a fancy man in New York and doesn't see his parents anymore. So he's pulled out of his innocence to go live in a world he didn't understand. So he's kind of spoiled. He goes to all these colleges. He drops out. He's a party boy, essentially. And until he buckles down against this newspaper, he becomes very serious about putting out supposed the truth. But there's a catch in that, too. Anyway, like there is in everything. So it's about a flawed character. And Orson was only 25 at the time, and he plays an old man of 80 sometimes. And you're convinced. All the actors, most of them had never made a movie before. They're from his Mercury Theater in New York. They're actors no one had ever heard of before, who became very famous later and had great careers. And they are all very convincing as young people and older people. Even though the makeup's not as good as we have now, they didn't need makeup. They did it with posture, movement, vocal techniques. They did it by acting instead of just putting on a fat suit or something like we do now. So anyway, and it was just astounding. People were like, how does this 25-year-old guy do this? Look at this thing. The innovation, the way the camera moves, the lighting, the deep focus, the long takes, the themes in the movie, love, loss. It's the hero's journey, but he's really not a hero because he essentially loses his whole life. Can heroes lose? That's a good question. I believe they can. Anyway, heroes don't always have to win, folks. But so this movie was a revolution. Citizen Kane. I'm going to post some little documentaries on it. I'll post where you can find it on YouTube. I think you're going to have to pay for it. I can't find a free copy of it. You could try. Hopefully, it's there. I've requested it to be there at Shasta College. You go to Shasta College website, go to video streaming at the library, and go to Canopy. It used to be there, and it used to be free for you guys. I'll go see if it's there again, but it wasn't there last time. You might have to go to YouTube and pay the $2 for it. You'll never regret it. Anyway, and if you're having trouble coming in with the money, talk to me about it. Don't be embarrassed. Okay, I'll come up with another film for you to watch. That's free. Citizen Kane. That's the assignment this week. It's an epic movie. It changed Hollywood. People are still talking about it. They're still analyzing. It's not my favorite movie, but I've probably seen it, I want to say 50 times. And I still see something new in it every time that I missed. That's how innovative it was, even though it's not all the tricky camera work we're doing now, but it's so smart and human and intelligent. And you got to be smart to appreciate it too. So get your thinking caps on, watch the movie, look for the assignment. I'll post it on there probably tomorrow. And I'll see you guys next time. The story of film continues.